So this is the third in a series that we've been doing on the subject of how to be good. And last week I spoke about the subject of living authentically. And I noticed during the talk and afterwards that I was left with the feeling of last week afterwards of emptiness and sadness. And I thought at first that it had been very inauthentic of me not to bring that up at the time. But on reflection, I think it's been something that's been growing in me for a while. And it started to come to a head last week. And that sadness is really about not knowing how to respond authentically to what's going on in our country and in our world at the moment. And by responding authentically, I mean responding from a place of understanding. What I've come to understand is that all of us are fundamentally connected within a unity of consciousness that some people call God, some people call the Tao, some people call the Buddha nature. I come from an understanding that there is one consciousness, that all our individual consciousnesses are an expression of. Each of us are an expression of that one consciousness. Not only that, but everything, sentient, animated or inanimate, everything is an expression of that one consciousness. And that consciousness has evolved throughout the millennia. What started with single-cell organisms bouncing off each other has arisen into a consciousness that creates opera, understands the nature of our DNA, can cure illnesses and reset broken bones, has seen that all men are equal, has recognized the ills of slavery, oppression, and injustice. A consciousness that can solve complicated problems and even paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. In short, we've become aware of the potential of our consciousness to such an extent that now we're able to manifest divinely inspired concepts that have come from way beyond the human brain. We've gone beyond the thinking of the mind into envisioning the qualities of the soul within our society. And our ancestors dreamed of this. They dreamed this for us. They wanted this, our ancestors, for us. Centuries ago, people who were yours and my ancestors dreamed of a world where diseases could be cured, where people treated each other with decency, where they could live free and express themselves without persecution. People came to this country with that desire front and center. Independence was declared with that dream foremost in the minds of those who signed the Declaration. And our Constitution was written with all of this in mind. We are what our ancestors dreamed us to be. And we're now in the position of dreaming for our descendants. What do we want for the generations that are going to come after us? We are the product of all the good that our ancestors have done. And we are now in that place where what we do will determine what we will leave for our descendants. It's we who are in the frame now. This is our time. It's we who are now looking from the depths of our souls into the consciousness that we all share. As we look out into the world from where we're sitting or standing now, we look out, we're connected to this building. We're connected with each other. Just look around and see who you're connected with, not just visually, not just in a sensory way, but in a deep way, in that we're all sharing of that one consciousness that we came from. And not only are we connected with each other and this building, but we're actually connected with everything that's beyond this building. Consciousness has no physical barriers. It transcends them. So our connection is with everything in our town here, everything in our valley. We're intimately connected with each part of this. Everything in our state. We're connected with everything in our nation, in our planet, in our world, in our universe. We're all part of that, and it's all part of us. The great sages of the last 10,000 years have taught this, and modern science has begun to prove it. So in gangster terms, we're connected. And our connection runs far deeper than we know. It runs deeper than the people we meet. It runs deeper than the people that are in our orbit on a day-to-day basis. Our spiritual understanding tells us that we're connected to all of it. And that understanding has been passed down to us from our ancestors. And the great question for us is, what are we going to leave our descendants? Will they thank us for what we've done for them, as we thank our ancestors for what they've done for us? And it's from that I come back to my sadness. My sadness is that I feel that the world that I'm living in is now actually going backwards. That many of the values and understanding that we've seen as being progress seem to be slipping away. We're living in a world where our climate is becoming increasingly unstable. And yet it's just not a priority. We're living in a world where autocracy is seen as the answer to problems. And yet our wisdom tells us that we are all interdependent, and a sharing of both resources and problems is the only way for us to progress. And we seem to be living in a time where possession and acquisition at the expense of others is seen as the only way to ensure safety. Which, by the way, is patently wrong and almost an oxymoron. That the acquisition at the expense of others is the only way to ensure safety. I think we're currently imperiled by stupidity. How do we discover the wisdom we need in order to serve our future? And the big question here is, how do we respond? How do I respond out of this sadness? How do I respond? How do we in our generation respond in a loving way to what we see as going on in the world, given that we understand that we're to love our enemies, who are, after all, as the Tai Te Ching tells us, the shadows that we ourselves cast in the world? How do we respond to what we see without going into opposition, which is merely to reinforce the positions that we oppose? I think that's the big question of our time. And I'm interested in finding the answer to that question. How do we respond? So over the last 3 months, we've reached out to some of our mentors. We reached out to James Finley and Cyprian Consiglio and Ilya Delio. I asked them that question, how do you see things at the moment? And they actually did some short videos, 5 to 10 minutes long each, and I put them out on YouTube. And so far, 25,000 people have watched these videos, which is quite, for us, that's a lot. I mean, we put out video, this service, probably 80 people will see it, but 25,000 is a lot. I'm just going to show 3 little clips. They're only a minute long. This is what they said. First of all, James Finley. This is what James Finley said. Next.
This is why God protects us from nothing, but God depends on us to do our best to protect ourselves and others from harm. And when harm is occurring, how to find the taproot of our heart and the love that sustains us in the stress. And what can we do to take incremental steps towards reestablishing a social order that's more consistent with the principles of a democracy, freedom by the people.
So that's James Finley and Ilya Delio. This is a little clip from Ilya Delio. Next.
We're living in, as we evolve more quickly with technology, we are becoming more interdependent, more complex, and we're having a difficult time navigating self-identity, personal identity, and what we're about as humans and as a collective humanity. And I do think, one way forward is the way inward. This is a tried and true path, since the emergence of self-reflective consciousness, that there's something about the human person within that, in a sense, is what's forming the without. So without a withinness and a deep interiority, which means really facing our own untruths within ourselves, dealing with the places that are, people speak quite often, that are dark, that are neglected, that are fearful. I think we have to come to that place of freedom from within ourselves. And I think the human person today is really longing for freedom, but is so afraid of freedom that they'd rather stay enchained to the untruths.
By the way, the projector is blinking at us at the moment, but it is working as well, so we'll do that. And then Cyprian Consiglio. This is what Cyprian said to us.
I would add just one more thing to that. I remember reading something in, I forgot his name, Sam Keen's book called The Absence of God, where he had a pretty strong critique of contemporary spirituality. We've been living in kind of luxurious times, I think, in the past couple of decades. He was a big supporter of all kinds of alternative spirituality for a long time, as I have been for many years myself. But his critique of it was that it has been largely irrelevant to the great social, political, and economic problems that we face. The great spiritual movements haven't necessarily promoted a new Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a new line of Niebuhr, a new Mother Teresa, a new Dorothy Day. It hasn't been prophetic in that. And we're not going to be able to rest back on our luxurious spiritualities of affluence anymore. We're going to have to really dig our heels and be prophetic and put our money where our mouth is and really put our lives on the line sometime for inclusivity rather than exclusivity. So it's time for us to maybe get off the cushion a little bit more and to get out there and preach the gospel, preach the good news if you're a Christian, preach inclusivity and solidarity, if you're just a person of goodwill and a spiritual seeker, but really build a better place and build a whole different environment in the midst of whatever we're going on.
Okay, next. So they're saying, it's about an internal thing. It's about us getting off the cushion and actually doing something. As I said, 25,000 people watch these videos. You can find them on our Aspen Wisdom website if you want to see the full videos. But given the number of people that are watching that did that, there seems to, I think, be a hunger to get some sort of answer to the question of how do we respond to what we're faced with. And here's the rub, I do not know the answer to the question. All I know is the question. And I believe that what we have to do right now, what we have to do is to live into the question. So what I'm proposing is that we do that we live into the question. Next. I'm proposing that we live into this question, how do we respond to the time that we're living through? And what I want to do is I want to create a forum whose purpose is to live into that question. Now, a forum is a place or meeting place or medium where ideas and views on particular issues are exchanged. And I want to create that sort of a forum. And I see this as being an ongoing process of attracting people to become a part of that forum and to contribute to it in any way they see fit by asking the question and living into the question. It could be papers, it could be Zooms, it could be videos, or even actually getting together. And so I've reached out to a number of people to say whether or not they'd be willing to come and be a part of that. A few of them have said yes, if you say the next. The first person that said next is Tim Shriver. Tim leads the Special Olympics International Board of Directors, and together with 6 million Special Olympics athletes in more than 200 countries, he promotes health, education, and a more unified world through the joy of sport. He's also founded something called the Dignity Index, which is designed to focus on dignity as a way of overcoming differences and bringing people together. So he's on board with us. Next. Then I reached out to Cynthia, friend of the family. She agreed to be involved and has already submitted a piece of work that we can actually disseminate from her. She's a member of our immediate community and one of the most influential spiritual speakers in the country. And you know, she came here to do a talk last year. She did a day or whatever. And then on Sunday, she did a Sunday service. And we put that on YouTube. And so far, 40,000 people have watched that Sunday service, which for us, you know, it's a big number, really. So that's that. And next, Cyprian Consiglio. Cyprian is currently the Secretary General of the Monastic Interreligious Dialogue and has spoken here in the past. And, you know, we're launching this initiative today. This is what this is about. Next. So this is how we're going to present it. We'll be promoting this both digitally and in print advertising. And we've actually set aside a weekend of the 7th and 8th of June to manifest a forum in person, online, or whatever it is. The most important person at that forum will be Matt Windhost, who actually does all the technology, and he's free that weekend. So that's what dictated the weekend for me. But the fact of the matter is we're going to see what's happened, see if we can live into that question. And it's something for all of us to use. All of us, I think, are looking at how to respond. So I'm suggesting that we live into this question and we just actually see if there's something that is worthwhile. I mean, I'm not for, you know, getting placards and burning torches and going down to USAID and stuff like that. I'm just not for that. There must be a better way of actually responding to what we're living in at the moment. So we're setting this up in order to see if we can come up with a better way. If you want to participate in any way, you get an email probably tomorrow with it. You can just click on the email and it'll take you through and you'll be able to see some of what I've said today and an ability to respond. And we'll just see. Matthew Fox has agreed to participate last weekend, which was absolutely fantastic. And also I've been in touch with someone. I was given a book by Diana Andy Godfrey at Christmas by someone called Sherry Mitchell, who is a Native American wisdom person, and I'm talking with her on Wednesday about the possibility of her involvement. It'd be great. We're so white here, you know, we're so middle class and things like that, and I want this to be more than just that. So it's really good to get some different faces on board. So that's what we're going to be doing. That's what that's how I'm suggesting that we go forward, and we just see how it works out. So, any thoughts? Any comeback on what I've said? Anyone like to say anything? Yes, Diane. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nicholas. Just in my first response to this is you are leading by example. You don't know how to respond to this, but your natural instinct is to bring us together and to give education and knowledge. So I think creating this forum is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn more and to learn of the interconnectedness of things and spirituality of things. And as you said, Sherry Mitchell, who wrote the Indigenous Wisdom book, talks about the interconnectedness of things and spirituality. And again, you can't control what others do, but you can share.
Yeah.
And by creating this forum, we'll be sharing that spirituality and interconnectedness of things. So that's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. It's so interesting, you hear these stories of people being interviewed on television, the radio, writers, and they say, well, what made you become a writer? They say, oh, I had to write, I had to do whatever it is. This is the first time I really felt I had to respond, I never felt it before, I sort of waffle off into the ether with, good ideas about meditation and stuff, but with this, I just felt, I literally had a feeling. Yeah, nothing I could do about that.
That's the right word.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Bruce, thank you.
Well, I think that we have evolved to create a hopelessly complicated world.
Yeah.
And so there's not going to be one solution to the problem. I think that to appeal to our natural spiritual tendencies is a great sort of motivator to then seek out different solutions.
Yeah.
One of the problems with democracy, they've always self-liquidated in the past, is ignorance, apathy, and the futility of individual action. I mean, what can I do? Type of thing. So whether, I'm sure that there are solutions educationally for political, economic, etc., pro-social skill upgrade. Our innate capabilities to get along with one another are tuned to 40,000 years ago. So you fast forward to the modern world, thinking back to Terry's presentation on Thursday night, where you have lots of people living alone in big cities and they've been moving around, they're uprooted from their 7 generations past and future, so I think that, to sort of say, here is a spiritual wisdom, energy, inspiration, let's ask the question. But then that's our long suit. I don't know, what'll happen as far as, all the little micro solutions we could come up with from a sort of a bottom up, but let's go.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, it is living into the question rather than necessarily, I really, one doesn't have an answer. But also sorry, Andy? I'd also like to say how great it was, Andy's meeting on Thursday, those who didn't come. We had 40 people here, fantastic presentation for the Loneliness Project, and it was a really good event, so really appreciate that. Anybody else to say anything to Ward? Yeah.
This might sound very cynical, but I think that the nature of man is basically greedy. And
Is what?
Greedy.
Greed.
Greed. The quest for wealth and power. And I think that if you look at collective consciousness of man, you have to include those that are really focused on accumulating wealth and power. And the paradox is that we're spiritually told that the answer is not out there. It's within the spark of cosmic dust, that the divine that's within us. But I think the divine that's within us is divided, is bifurcated. If you look at the yin yang, you can't have light without darkness, and it's a balance. And I think I've thought this for probably 60 years, that because man is basically greedy, that communism hasn't worked, that it's the accumulation of wealth and the focus on getting more. And I think perhaps the reason that the world is going in the opposite direction from liberal democracy, where we care about each other, and outside of ourselves, like the Truman Doctrine, to give to others that are in need, has met with the pendulum that says, you're not paying attention to me. You have to have more me. We have a president that is transactional. All you have to do to get favor from me is give me a couple of $1 million or praise me. So, like you, I don't have the solution, but I do have the thought that there is this division from beginning of man, feudalism, where you get wealthy on the backs of others, and that when you take too much, people want to they want to break up that wealth, and I think eventually we're going to get to a point where the pendulum is going to start swinging the other way, and that the world is going to care more about each other than it does about ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's all true. And I'm very much a believer in the evolution of consciousness.
Consciousness doesn't evolve all at the same time. You have the Taliban in one place, and you have the Western liberal democracies.
I think if you take the big picture, I think there is an evolution. I think there is. Let me, Jenna, turn that off. I think there is an evolution, and I think if you look at the whole swing of things, that the whole acquisition, might, and right in humanity is pretty medieval in the way of the thinking. And I believe in, if you look at the way that we've developed as societies, I believe that we are on that path, and we will get fluctuations when people think, and you have to look at the fact, particularly in our country, in that there are millions of people who are not fundamentally looked after at the moment. And it's not surprising that they're considerably aggrieved about not being looked after by whoever. It doesn't really matter who it is. They've just not been looked after. And I think we have to catch up with ourselves. And it's not just, us nice liberal people who want to, make sure that we live in a nice life. We have to be including everything. And the fluctuations that we see and, whatever the characters that we see in the fluctuations of that respond to what's going on. But I do see the evolution of consciousness. I do see the fact that we're moving away from that medieval model. And whether it comes up and down again in different ways, in our lifetimes, I do believe it is on the way out. And that fundamentally things are going to move forward into a way where there is an understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. And therefore, this is an educational job. It's about education. It's about people understanding. And the very fact of the matter is the acquisition for me doesn't work. It doesn't work in society. What works is realizing that we're all in this together. And that is the thing that has to come forward, I think. That is the education job. Yeah.
Well, in response to that as well, Nicholas, as the Dalai Lama says, the 21st century is the rise of the feminine consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge piece of where we're headed, and will bring that heart center as we move forward.
Yes.
Do you think women are greedy?
We can't have a conversation. It doesn't. No, this doesn't work because he hasn't got a microphone.
I just want to say that indigenous people have an excellent balance between the masculine and feminine, and it is probably true that the colonists, when they came over here, were male-focused and dominant, and so we have gotten out of balance.
That's the feudal society.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we can't have a conversation. Poor old Ward hasn't got a microphone. Yeah, Dan, let's have you. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Sure. It's nice to be in this community, and it's like you can't say anything today without being more divisive. And we're discussing this, but what really affects me and makes me want to check out is, if we're talking about the United States, over half the people in the country want what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're in the minority.
Yeah. Well, I do think you have to take the bigger picture. I mean, I think half the people in the country, there's a dissatisfaction. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge the dissatisfaction that exists there. And we have to think, how can we respond in a way to all of this? I don't see this as partisan. I see this as being about the education of people as to how the world actually works. And the world fundamentally works on the basis of love. That's how the world actually works. And no, it don't. I mean, otherwise I'm in the wrong job. Otherwise, I might as well go back to advertising or growing vegetables in England. I mean that's what I base my understanding on. The fact is that it's based, we're given our lives with no expectation of return. The universe was given with no expectation of return. It is based on love. And if we can allow the expression of humanity to be an expression of love. And yeah, you say, well, that is, a big ask. It is, but that's the direction I see it's going in. That is the long-term direction that it's going in. Yeah, Carol.
I do believe that there's greed in the world. I think there's been greed forever. I don't feel that the average human being is greedy. I think the street we live on, we're on different sides of the political spectrum, but we all hurt together, love together, help one another, and have for over 30 years. And I think generally on average, people just want to make a good wage, help other people, take care of their family, take care of their friends. I don't feel that they're greedy.
Yeah.
I feel, on the whole, they're good Samaritans. They want love, they want peace, and they want to move forward in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm really feeling the urgency that Cyprian was talking about. That our spirituality of sitting on the cushion, is one thing. But actually, we want to make a contribution. We want to make a contribution, and the contribution we want to make is one of understanding. And it's an inclusive understanding. It's an inclusive idea. And, how we do that, I don't know. But it's how do we make that contribution. Yes, Brennan, and then I'll come to Lou.
I would like just to offer, I think, Tom, there's an inclination to believe that, and I could see why you would, but I also think there's been tens of thousands of years of human history in which we were collaborative and collective. And as I mentioned last week, there's this something called adaptive epigenesis, and that is where your sort of how you become human is really culturally embedded. And so we're very adaptive, and so whatever we're taught is kind of how we behave in the world. And I think we're at the end of modernity. So if you've heard of the book Hospicing Modernity, it talks about this. All of us have been educated in it. In fact, the whole world's in collapse. We're just kind of the last tail end of the collapse of modernity, I would posit. If you look everywhere in the world, it's not working. But yet, we were all educated in the public education system, I think, where this idea of every man or woman for themselves to try to get as much as possible to contribute to this, infinite growing economy on a finite world that just sort of run its course. And so I've thought a lot about this because I've got this little guy here. Towns, you want to say hi?
Hi.
And so I worry a lot about him and future generations. But I do think in the spirit of Carol Sanford, who she wrote a bunch of books, but she did the regenerative life. She was actually in business and trying to talk about what is regeneration, right? What is reciprocity, which is at the core of regeneration. Reciprocity is when you're adding value back into the collective whole, right? So everybody kind of creates this regenerative culture. But we're not taught to do that. But the other thing she says is that you can't attack these problems straight on. So actually grabbing your pitchfork and your torch and your sloganeering and going out into the streets, is not really going to work, actually. But what I do think we can do are small things that work against the conditioning that we're all brought up in. So is it really worth buying, I don't know, the cheaper hamburger that was made in Brazil at the expense of rainforest? Spend a couple extra bucks. Is it really worth going skiing when we can be in community together, right? So that sort of trying to let go of that sort of innate, I've got to get my pleasure on before I can even contribute to community. I think it's the other way. You have to contribute to community, and then you can get those sort of ego needs met.
Thank you. And finally, Lou, yeah. Pass it on to Lou, Tom. Thanks.
I just want to mention 3 instincts I think we're born with.
Yeah.
So all of us come out of the womb with the instinct for survival, to create and or procreate, and to be social. So as we're looking at this forum, I think whether we're on the left or the right, we all have the need to survive. We may look greedy, like just for myself, but then the social aspect, if we think that we're going to survive better if we isolate, I don't think that's true. We need to be so inclusive. So somehow with this forum, to have the dialogue really include everybody with that respect, that we all come out of the womb with those 3 instincts, and we intend to live them, however we're going to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. So this is the conversation. I mean, there isn't. We're not, looking for an answer necessarily. We're living into the question. I say we're living and loving into the question and seeing how it goes. And thanks so much for being willing just to participate in it, because as we hear ourselves speak together, all of us are affected, and all of us are more aware of the need to respond in a loving way to whatever comes our way. So the offertory. It's so difficult to say. So now we have the offertory. So if you'd like to make a contribution to the chapel, we've got the offertory here. You can just come up while they're playing, and or you can use the QR code if you're over there. Thank you for the microphone, Julie. That's great. And if you're watching online, that famous donate button keeps the lights on here, and we do so appreciate you being willing to press that. So while that's happening, Heather and Andrew are going to play some more music, and I'm going to put the screen up.